Well, hello everyone, this is International Master Andrew Martin, welcoming you to this all-new Foxy Openings DVD on the main line of the French Winawer. The line we're going to examine today begins with the move e4, black plays the French defence e6, d4, d5, knight c3, and now bishop b4. A very aggressive move, putting the question to white's e4 pawn. Now there are many alternatives for white here, but by the most popular by quite some margin here is e5, and after c5, white plays a3. Already black has choices. Bishop a5 is a possibility, was played in World Championship matches between Smyslov and Botvinnik and many times since. It's a favourite with Sumbat Lapuchin, the Armenian Grandmaster. But we're going to stick with bishop takes c3, b takes c3, when in return for giving up the bishop pair, black has saddled white with a pretty poor pawn structure. And once again, this is the parting of the ways. Now, the more traditional ways for black to play this position involve both knight e7 and queen to c7. But I'm going to take a look for you at the line with queen a5. This is a more unusual move than either of the other two, but I think it contains a lot of aggressive and dynamic possibilities for black, which cannot be ignored. It's also scoring very well for black at Grandmaster level these days. Now this move was in the doldrums for quite some time, after a famous game, Bobby Fischer versus Hook. Bill Hook from the Virgin Islands, back in the 1960s and 70s, was really the guy who popularised this variation from black's point of view. Of course, in the Virgin Islands, you don't get the opportunity to play chess very often against players of master strength. Hook was clearly a player of immense ability. And so, you know, it came as a great surprise to the chess world when in a chess Olympiad, Hook managed to play this line twice against Bobby Fischer, none other than Fischer himself, and the Israeli Grandmaster Vladimir Libertson. Whereupon Hook emerged with a very creditable score, really, of 1 out of 2. He actually beat Libertson with this line. So that made the chess world sit up and take notice. However, due to the way Fischer played against Hook, the variation didn't really take off. In recent years, maybe the last 10 years, I think the possibilities available to black in this line have been reappraised, and this line is now thought to be fully viable at any level of chess. For club players, it's especially good because it puts the pressure on white's position straight away. Immediately white's got to think about the pawn on c3. He usually defends with bishop d2. We will see queen d2 a bit later on the DVD. And now black's idea is queen a4, blockading the entire white queen side. So that's the first idea of this variation. What else can black be thinking about in this position? Well, as you see, the queen is putting pressure on the d4 pawn. I'm not saying it's a good idea for black to go grabbing that pawn, especially if white offers him the pawn immediately. In general, in this variation, you have to exercise patience with black. I think that's the most important quality needed to play this line. But, of course, the pressure on d4 can't be ignored. Black can intensify this pressure by developing normally with knight c6, knight ge7, and I would say his ideal development in this line can be completed if he manages to get the moves b6 and bishop a6 in. This idea of b6 and bishop a6 is one which the queen on a4 is also very well poised to support. What are the problems with this line? Well, as usual in the French Winawer, the dark squares potentially hold a banana skin for black. Of course, in the Winawer, the piece that black doesn't have is the dark square bishop. So black has to be very, very careful that white doesn't just blind away on the dark squares. Therefore, a critical move here is certainly queen to g4. That's the move Fischer played against Hook. Well, we will see later on that black can defend himself with g6. And now, in view of the pressure on c2, Fischer actually returned to d1 in this position. Well, basically saying that the move g6 is so horrendous, I can afford to even waste a move here. Well, modern thinking is that black can survive in this position and survive with interest. I'll be showing you how black does it a little later on. But before we go into all that detail, I'm going to go back to queen a4 now and show you an ideal game, what I consider to be an ideal game for black in this system. which was played very recently in February 2010 between Raut Padmini, 2294, and Grandmaster Ivan Farago from Hungary. This game was played in Budapest. Farago, of course, is a French connoisseur. He is a veteran Grandmaster. He's been playing the French throughout his chess career. I've never actually seen him employ the line with Queen A5 and Queen A4 before, so just go to show you, you can teach an old dog new tricks. He's willing to employ the latest thinking. And he does play this line very well, as we will see. Well, Padmini played Queen B1. That's another of the main lines. If you had to choose between that and Queen G4, I think most players would certainly stick with Queen G4. But Queen B1 has merit. It holds the queen side together. It doesn't lose time, and it threatens the cruncher, Bishop B5 check, winning the black queen. So Farago blocks with C4, and now white plays H4. White's theatre of action in this line is often the king side. So black's got to be aware that he has to defend himself on the king side usually, and the black squares in particular. Knight C6 was played by Farago. White pushes on, and now another critical moment arises as black halts the advance of the H-pawn by playing H6. I think it's very wise to do this because, well, if white's allowed to play H6, weaknesses on the dark squares start opening up, and that's exactly what you don't want in this position as black. You should be aware that the F7 pawn can be nailed down in this line, so black's got to be a little bit careful on the king side, and Farago attends to business by playing H6. White plays F4, Knight G E7, Knight F3, and now Bishop D7. Just getting the pieces out, basically. Well, this block central position will all be about forthcoming pawn breaks. So what are the breaks that both players are trying to achieve? White is certainly thinking about trying to play F5. That's the usual way white cracks open the black position in the French defence. But it seems to me that that move is a long way off. Black's got knight, bishop and pawn covering that square. So even if white plays G4, and that's what he did, it's still going to be difficult to get F5 in. Black's pawn break, traditionally here, is F6. And once again, it seems to me that this move is much easier for black to play than the white pawn break. I mean, black could just play it, you know. Farago tied it up at the back first with castles on the queen side, but black is certainly looking forward to F6 in this position. Just dropping back to the position after Bishop D7, Queen takes B7 was certainly a possibility. Well, black plays Rook B8 against that, and after Queen C7, black's got quite an attractive choice. I mean, he can immediately take a draw in this position with Rook C8, but I wonder if he can actually play for more here with Queen takes C2. The white position is a little bit, how can I put it, inelastic. It's a bit static. And that is the problem with white's play in this line. It can often become very static, and you can end up with your king stuck in the middle, unable to connect the major pieces. One of the main challenges for white in this line is to find the most effective way of connecting his major pieces. I think that Queen A5, Queen A4 is a very profound positional idea, and it's not at all easy for white to get his queen and his rooks working together, as we'll see in this game. Well, white decided not to take that poison pawn on B7 and play G4. Black castled. Bishop H3. So white's still trying to get F5 in. Rook D F8. The motivation behind that is completely clear. Black wants to play F6. And now white gets caught in two minds. Now the player with white is not weak by any means. He's graded 2294. So he knows what he's doing. But I don't think he can see a way forward in this position. So he kind of marks time with Bishop F1. That's a typical sign of indecision by a player who hasn't really got a plan. He starts out with a plan, but he can't see how to realise that plan, so he goes into retreat. White's king is the problem, because black's threatening to leave open the game with F6 and then F takes E5. The white king stuck in the centre could well feel the heat. I mean, it's not clear whether white wants to castle short in this position. Of course, that was the decision Padmini had to make. Should he castle in this position? That brings the major pieces together for sure, but it's risky because black can lever open the king side quite easily with the help of moves like F6 or even G6, one or the other. So white gets caught in two minds and he plays Bishop F1. Black meanwhile has no such qualms and just plays f6. And after bishop e2, Farrago played bishop e8. Again, the move of a French connoisseur. You know, the bishop need not remain passive on d7 the whole game through, and now black maybe even be thinking about playing g6, activating the light squared bishop. So perhaps that's why white plays knight h4. As the knight drifts away from the centre, so black opens up the game in the centre. The game of chess has an internal logic to it, and as the balance of the position tilts, so black tries to redress that balance in his favour. The black queen has done her job on the queen side, nailing down white's major pieces, so she returns to the action with queen a5. Queen b2 was answered by g6, and h takes g6, a move which white could scarcely avoid, by knight takes g6. Well, you know, white doesn't want to start exchanging all the pieces in this position. If he does so, a bad endgame awaits. Black's pawn structure is obviously superior to white's, and a move like rook b1 here, well, I mean, that's easily rebuffed by, for instance, b6. Black could even consider retreating the queen here, queen c7. Both moves are completely safe. So white thinks to himself, okay, bad endgames, you know, they're coming up if I exchange the pieces, so I better keep the pieces on. Thus he plays knight g2. Okay, that's fair enough. But where is white's play coming from in this position? Black's gradually building up on the king side. Rook h7 is very flexible. It defends b7. It maybe threatens to double up on the f-file. The rook may go elsewhere. It's difficult to see play for white. Bishop comes to e3. And now Farrago strikes his opponent dumb by playing the remarkable knight g takes e5. Now admit it, did you see that move coming? Certainly Padmini didn't. And it is rather a shocker. White seems to be defending himself, but suddenly knight takes e5. And the point of this move is that after d takes e5, which wasn't actually played in the game, black is going d4. And when white retreats with bishop d2, black is going queen takes e5. This position highlights the poor coordination between the white forces in this position, and it really is very difficult for white. I mean, if he takes on d4, well, we just take back with the knight, and white is in a terrible mess. Other variations, well, they're not easy to find for white because his pieces are all tied down. The bishop on e2 is preventing the white king from running elsewhere. So that was Farrago's intention. So back to knight ge5 and white castle on the queen side. Of course, that is a rather miserable move. Knight comes back to d7, knight f4, and now knight b6. The knight is en route to that beautiful square on a4. As we've seen, black inherited a better pawn structure as early as move 5 in this game, and now he's starting to cash in on that structure after knight a4. Farrago is even able to give up the e6 pawn here in order to achieve coordination after knight a4. And after queen a1, black continued very dynamically here with knight takes c3. King d2. Well, what a disastrous move that is for white. But of course, if he takes on f8 in this position, minimum we have knight takes e2 check, and the black attack should really be decisive. So king d2 was played. Knight takes d1 check. Of course, the rook was on pre as well. Black's attack has completely succeeded here, and the rest of the game sees Farrago confidently mopping up. The queen comes back to c7, tidying up, and black centralises with rook e7. When you've got the extra exchange, use it. Black brings his major pieces now to the open file, and well, he's threatening b6 and rook f e6, which will win material. So rook takes h6, rook takes h6. I think white was getting desperate at this point, and a final nice tactical point to finish off. Rook takes e2 check, king takes e2, queen h2 check, forking the king and the bishop. White resigned. So that game is very instructive. It showed how white struggles in this line to achieve coordination of his pieces. You know, it was by no means a weak player playing with white there, but he couldn't find the best way to get his pieces working together. And excellent stuff from black. Casting on the queen side, good deployment of his pieces, the break f6, and the final attack, using all manner of dynamic means. So an excellent way to start our investigation, and an encouraging one too.